Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another Kano Tryharding Modern. Today, we'll be playing Coffers Control once more. This is probably, I think, the last iteration before I actually start splashing colors. I've been ignoring a couple of versions of this deck that I want to play in favor of trying to iron this one out. But the last version that we played on stream kind of lost a little bit too much life, and I've tried to adjust that a little bit. I dropped some of the cards that were losing us some life. I dropped Murderous Rider, and I dropped the 3-mana Liliana in favor of playing a 4th Baleful Mastery, because we're just going to end up having to give our opponents cards, because we can't be Feed the Swarming and all this other stuff and like Thought Seizing and Sign and Blooding and just not be able to gain life back. I have a Tribute to Hunger and a Soul Shatter in the 3-drop slot, and there was one other thing that I changed, I thought, in the main deck. Maybe not. Out of the sideboard, I have Vampiric Link versus... this is the Planar Chaos version of Lifelink. The spell, not the mechanic. But the idea is, if we come up against a deck like Burn that's playing things like Eidolon of the Great Revel, we can actually Vampiric Link whatever their very damaging creature is, and when it deals damage, it gains us that much life. And it is a triggered ability, not lifelink, so it cannot save us from exactly lethal damage, say a Scourge of the Skyclaves hitting us for 8 when we're at 8 life, because it is a trigger, but if we're at 9 life, or something like that, it would gain us 8 life after we go to 1. So, it can matter versus some creatures that do a ton of damage or do a ton of damage to the board. I'm keeping the Feed the Swarms. I've gone up to 3 Necromenches just because I think it's probably the best Memoricide effect for us. If I was playing blue, I'd play Unmoored Ego. I do have a version of this deck that's going to play blue, but I still have to build it because I have a few ideas of what to do with it. Still 1 Damnation effect. I took out Bantu's Last Reckoning, and I added a Curse of Death's Hold. I don't have any Knight of Soul's Betrayal. It might be better because it's just this but 1 less, except it hits us too. Although the only creature we're actually playing in the main deck is that Archon of Cruelty. So, I think I've talked about this enough. I'm just going to go ahead and jump into a league. Hopefully we do well. And I'll see you guys in round 1. Alright, round 1 will be on the play. We have a Fatal Push, 2 Swamps, a Baleful Mastery, a Sign in Blood, and a Coffers. I think this hand is good. We've got removal, we've got card draw, we've got a Coffers, and we have a threat. No Hand Hate, which I think is the only other thing I'd rather lead on with this deck, but what can you do? Opponent leads on Urza's Tower into an Expedition map, okay. Dice Factory. This isn't just regular Tron. We draw a Swamp, play a Swamp, Sign in Blood. We get an Urborg and a Castle Lockflame. So opponent untaps. They play a Surge Node, then pass the turn. We untap. We draw Inquisition. So play Urborg. Go Inquiring. Mono Blue Dice Tron, maybe? Opponent has a Chalice and 2 Mystic Forges, so take the Chalice from them. Pass the turn. If they play Karn Great Creator, at least we can Baleful Mastery. Opponent is going to Surge Node onto the Cornucopia. They untap. They play Blast Zone. They're, I think, considering playing Mystic Forge here. So they're going to Surge Node first to maintain their mana. One thing that I have seen people in the comments mention, I don't know who specifically, so I apologize for not giving you credit, but they were like, they recommended I could play Ratchet Bomb in this deck, which does make kind of some sense. It would answer a lot of 0-drops, so if we were playing against something like Affinity, it would work. We untap, we draw Ob Nixilis, play Cabal Coffers, play Ob Nixilis, draw a card, Erebos' Intervention, pass the turn, opponent untaps. They play a Power Plant, so they will be able to Expedition map for Tron, though I don't think they need it. Opponent probably is going to Surge Node for another Mystic Forge, maybe? Like Surge Node onto Cornucopia, play Mystic Forge, and then... I've got a feeling we're going to be playing Necromentia out of the board versus our opponent's deck. Play a Swamp. Uptick Ob Nixilis. We draw a Bloodstained Mire. Play Liliana. Make a zombie. Pass the turn. So my opponent is holding Mystic Forge, 1 unknown, so they're probably going to Surge Node and then Expedition map for the last Tron land, which is exactly what is happening. They may even tick up Blast Zone to 2, using their remaining mana. Okay, they get an Urza's Mine. They untap. They play Urza's Mine. So presumably they can play a lot of the cards off the top of their deck. They get a Karn Great Creator. So let's see what they wish for. We can deal with Karn with Baleful Mastery. They play an Everflowing Chalice on 0 off the top of their deck. Okay, they're going to wish. If it's Liquid Metal Coating, that will not be enough. Pithing Needle. Okay, my opponent is going to Pithing Needle one of our Planeswalkers. They cannot Pithing Needle Cabal Coffers, because it is a mana ability. They exile the top card of their deck, which was an Urza's Tower. They do not need additional mana at this juncture. Okay, they play Pithing Needle. They name Liliana Dreadhorde General. They're going to charge up that Cornucopia. Then they play another Karn. Okay, and they're going to wish. Might be Coffers this time, or not, it might be Coding this time. That, I think, would make the most sense to me, unless they have a artifact threat like Walking Ballista they want to power out with 1,000,000 counters. Okay, they get Coding, which they can play this turn. They'll probably try to shut off Coffers on our upkeep. Or Obnixilis, that would also be reasonable. So we untap. They're going to shut off Obnixilis. We draw Swamp. So Baleful Mastery Karn using 2 mana. Uptick Ob to 8. Okay, we get a Sign in Blood. So play a Swamp. Add a bunch of mana. Sign in Blood. Too many lands. Okay. Go to combat. Hit our opponent for 2. They go to 16. We pass the turn. They untap. Opponent plays a 3rd Karn Great Creator. So they could blow up Cabal Coffers if they wanted. They're not doing that, they're wishing. This is probably Walking Ballista. I'm just not sure what else they would spend this much mana on. Paradox Engine. Oh, that's pretty good. I think that lets them go infinite with as much mana as they have. They'd have 2 redraws at any given time. Okay, they play Paradox Engine. Well, there's nothing we can do about that. So they're going to Surge Node onto Cornucopia. Then they can play anything and untap all of their artifacts. So they could turn my whole board into artifacts if they wanted to. They play a Surge Node. They untap all their stuff. So they can use their floating mana to Surge Node onto Everflowing Chalice if they want to distribute their mana, but they don't. Okay. Okay. Opponent exiles the top card of their deck, which was an Urza's Saga. They play a new Cornucopia. Floating mana. Untap all their stuff. Cornucopia resolves. Surge Node. Float Blue. Core Tapper. Yep. That makes a lot more mana. They're still not playing cards out of their hand. Hopefully with our Necromentia effects we can hit all of their combo pieces. Mainly Karn Great Creator. I'm not sure how they would win without it. But between our 8 Thoughtseize effects versus a deck like this, we're probably okay. Okay, Maze Mind Tome. That draws extra cards. The main issue here is we Sign in Blooded twice, and we've drawn a bunch of extra cards off Ob, and we basically drew only lands. Yep, opponent making 1,000,000 mana. They play an Expedition map. Okay, I'm just going to F6 at this point. I do want to see how they'll kill me, because it might give me insight as to how this deck actually functions. I suspect we are fine against combo decks like this. I mean, it's probably Walking Ballista, but there's no guarantee that's the case. I mean, if it's Walking Ballista, we're already dead and they're just looking for it. Okay, they float a bunch of blue. They exile Urza's Tower off the top of their deck. They play another Cornucopia, untap everything. Another Everflowing Chalice, floating more mana. I could get Blue Sun Zenith for 41. Opponent scries with Maze Mind Tome, still digging. Exile and Urza's Saga. They play a Core Tapper, untap all their stuff. They still aren't playing cards from hand. If I had a Graph Digger's Cage, I'd probably bring that in because my opponent wouldn't be able to cast Core Tappers from their deck. They play another Mystic Forge, this one out of their own hand, which I think officially they should have played to begin with because that gives them more potential top decks per card cast. But it exiles Urza's Saga, plays another Core Tapper, they scry again. I mean, they could also just be looking for like a Jace or a Labman or a Thassa's Oracle. Exile Urza's Mine. They play another Cornucopia, untap everything. They're up to 104 floating mana. Okay, opponent scries and gains life. They play another Everflowing Chalice, kicked once, untapping everything. I don't know why they're floating colorless mana now. Another Mystic Forge. There's no way they don't fit, like, they're gonna win. I just don't know how. I could have skipped all of this, but maybe I should have. They play an Expedition map. So they have, like, up to 6 or so shuffles to try and find something else they could play to keep comboing if they had to. Another Core Tapper. Another Maze Mind Tome. I really suspect it's Thassa's Oracle. That's probably the easiest way for them to win. Ensnaring Bridge. Yeah, that's fine. We don't really care. Half the times we win, it's because our opponent gives up. Tormod's Crypt. Yep. Exile to Blast Zone. Opponent is up to 190 floating mana. They play another Surge Node, untap everything. They play another Ensnaring Bridge. They only have 11 cards left in their deck. Another Karn. Okay, this one, presumably, they can use to wish for a win condition. Okay. And it's Walking Ballista. Okay, I'm not going to wait for my opponent to tap. This is fine. We'll just concede. Okay, so versus our opponent's deck, I definitely want Necromentia. I definitely want Feed the Swarm because they are playing Urza's Saga, and we can take them off of lands that way. Nile Spellbomb might matter. I didn't see anything specifically that buys back from the grave, but it is unlikely we need Fatal Push for anything. Baleful Mastery and Feed the Swarm should be able to pick up. Tribute to Hunger doesn't do anything. Liliana the Dark Realms I don't think does anything here. We want to max out on Hand Hate, and I think I can cut even an Erebos' Intervention here. Actually, I think Erebos' Intervention, or even Torment of Hailfire in the main deck, does a little bit more than Damnation does. Like, Soul Shatter at least hits Planeswalkers. Okay. I think what happens here is we're going to Thoughtseize our way into a Necromentia on Karn, and we're going to see what win conditions they have in the deck, and then try and fire off another Necromentia. That's the plan. I don't know if it'll work. I could play Nile Spellbombs to just try and cycle through my deck a little bit faster. That might be reasonable. But let's try it like this. Alright, I would like to play first. Other than the multiple Urborgs, I think this hand is fine. Multiple Sign in Blood should get us to a third land we can actually play. I think I am going to keep this. I don't think there's enough disruption in this hand, but we should draw something. If we draw mono lands, I'm going to be really sad. So, lead on Inquisition. Let's see what they got. Surge Node, Everflowing Chalice, 2 halves of the Urza's lands. I'm going to take Everflowing Chalice from them. Pass the turn. Kind of hoping my opponent Ghost Quarters me. Ghost Quarters the Urborg. Opponent plays Power Plant and Surge Node. Surge Node. We untap. We draw a Swamp. Play Bloodstained Mire. Sign in Blood. Okay, we get a Thoughtseize and a Mastermind's Acquisition. And my camera crashed, and I'm not sure why. That's disconcerting. So opponent plays Urza's Mine, and I will restart OBS here in a second so that y'all can continue seeing my face not frozen in one way. Opponent plays a Welding Jar, then passes. Alright, and we're back, and hopefully the camera doesn't crash this time. So we untap, we draw Soul Shatter. So lead on Thoughtseize. Opponent has Chalice of the Void, double Mystic Forge. I think I have to take Chalice, actually, because if they put it on one, that takes us off of a lot of stuff. Play a Swamp. Sign in Blood. Double Swamps, okay. Pass the turn to our opponent. Opponent plays Urza's Saga. Okay. Well, there is a win condition. I'm kind of hoping to draw Feed the Swarm now. Another Sign in Blood. So I can either Mastermind's Acquisition for Necromentia, or I can Sign in Blood and try and draw Feed the Swarm, which I have 4 of, and I haven't drawn one yet, so another Thoughtseize. Well, fire off the Thoughtseize. I'm not really worried about one construct. Multiple may be a problem. So take a Mystic Forge from our opponent, pass the turn. I have done 10 damage to myself from 3 Sign in Bloods and 2 Thoughtseizes. So opponent plays a Ghost Quarter, and they're going to play a Mystic Forge. Okay. We untap. We draw Inquisition. So Inquisition, check their last card in hand. It's a power plant. Play a Swamp. Let's go get Necromentia. Pass the turn. Opponent probably makes a construct here, unless they have really big other plans. Next turn, they just float mana. Okay. They didn't want to make a construct. So they're going to tutor with Inventor's Fair, or they're going to assemble Tron first. Not sure why they didn't use their floating mana. They get a tower. They play Cornucopia, 0 counters. They can Surge Node over to the Cornucopia. They exile Tower off the top of their deck, because they just drew one, I think. Then they play Ensnaring Bridge. We untap, draw Cabal Coffers, which I'm not going to play yet because my opponent has a Ghost Quarter. Play a Swamp. Necromentia, our opponent. I could name Urza's Tower, because we know they have one in hand, but that gives them a zombie. Let's go Karn, Great Creator. So we exile all 4 from their deck. They're holding 2 lands. And the only way they have left to win in the deck is Urza's Saga. Okay. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. Inventor's Fair, trigger, they gain a life. Okay, they exile the top card of their deck to Mystic Forge. Exiling Urza's Saga? Don't they want to play that? How else do they have to win? I just checked their whole deck, I didn't see anything. I should have screenshotted it. Okay, they sack Expedition Map. Maybe they go and get an Urza's Saga. Maybe they think they didn't need to draw one. Now they get a Saga. Alright, then they pass. Come on, Necromentia number 2. Cabal Coffers. Not really what I was going for, but it'll work. Play Coffers. Add a bunch of mana. Play Archon of Cruelty, force them to discard. We get to draw. We get an Inquisition. They ditched Urza's Saga? Inquisition. Power plant. What are they doing? What is happening? How do they win? I don't think, Core Tapper beat down? I don't know what does it. They play a tower. They exile their 4th Urza's Saga, so it's not that. That's not how they're planning to win the game. And it's not whatever's in their hand, because they were holding a power plant. They're running out of time. They're gonna lose the match. I don't know what they do. I was pretty sure the only way they had to win was Urza's Saga beatdown, but play a Swamp, pass the turn. All right, let's see what they tutor. I mean, if it's an artifact creature, they can't attack because of Ensnaring Bridge. Yeah, unless there's an artifact that can somehow win the game that I don't that I didn't evaluate when I looked at their deck. I was pretty sure it was just Urza's Saga, token beats was their only other way to go. Maze Mind Tome. Okay. Alright, they scoop. So we got there. It was a little concerning, but we got there. Any other changes we want to make? I don't think so. I think we're good just to run it back. We do really need Hand Hate on turn 1, because if my opponent decides to play Chalice on 1 turn 2, that shuts off a lot of our deck. Okay. We have Feed the Swarm, we have Profane Tutor, we have Inquisition. This hand is great, because we are going to draw what we need. And in theory, we have a way to disable a Chalice on one. Opponent leads on Welding Jar, Inventor's Fair. We draw Obnixilis, play a Swamp, Inquisition. Opponent has Core Tapper, Maze Mine Tome, Mystic Forge. They have nothing to put charge counters on, and we have creature removal. So I'm going to take Maze Mine Tome, because I don't want them manipulating their top decks. Pass the turn. They play an Urza's Mine. They play Core Tapper. We untap. We draw Thoughtseize. Now I can Thoughtseize Mystic Forge, and that's really not a bad idea, but I think the play here is to Sign in Blood, because we need to draw lands. Feed the Swarm and Coffers. Well, Coffers is a land, it's just not what I was looking for. So opponent can play Blast Zone here. They play Urza's Saga. Well, that's going to get swarmed. They hit us for 1, we go to 16, untap. We draw Archon of Cruelty. Feed the Swarm, blow up the Saga, play Coffers, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. I would really, really like to draw a Swamp. Opponent plays a Welding Jar and a Blast Zone. We take 1 and go to 15, untap. We draw a Swamp. There it is. Play the Swamp, activate. So I'm going to take Mystic Forge from them. They have 2. Because they're good at drawing. So take Mystic Forge. Now I can either suspend Profane Tutor, or I can Baleful Mastery, and I think Tutor is the way to go. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps, gains a life off of Inventor's Fair. They draw a card. They play Cornucopia, and this lets them play Mystic Forge. That was kind of what I was worried about. And I could have killed Core Tapper, but... Okay, Profane Tutor taking down. We draw Thoughtseize, but they have no longer any cards in hand. I could fire off Baleful Mastery now, just to force them to use their mana. I cannot play Obnixilis, so I think we just wait, because if my opponent does play Karn Great Creator this turn, we need to be able to Baleful Mastery it immediately. So they gain a life, they draw a card, they play Cornucopia from the top of their deck, they charge up that Cornucopia, they have 5 mana now, they play Karn Great Creator, they're going to wish, so let's see what they wish for, Paradox Engine. Okay, so we are going to Baleful Mastery Karn in response to this, because that gives them 3 mana. Kill Karn. So they can play like Ensnaring Bridge from the top of their deck or something. They play another Core Tapper. Then they pass. Okay, so Profane Tutor coming off Suspend. Cast it. Get Necromentia. Then we draw. Torment of Hailfire. Activate Coffers. Thoughtseize Paradox Engine. They are now holding nothing. Then Necromentia our opponent. And we say Karn, the Great Creator, because that is still going to be their best threat that we can exile. They have an Emrakul in their deck, as well as a Walking Ballista and Urza's Saga. So those are the 3 things we need to deal with. Pass the turn. My opponent is already on their way to having a lot of mana. And they're gaining life, which means this Torment of Hailfire is going to be less effective. I still think that what do you call it? That Necromentia target was the best thing we could do there. Okay, we untap. We draw Verdant Catacombs. Play Verdant Catacombs. Crack it. Get a Swamp. Coffers. Play Obnixilis. I can either downtick on Core Tapper here, but that only stops them from having 1 more mana than they would have otherwise. So let's draw an extra card. It's an Erebos' Intervention. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They gain a life. They draw a card, which I think is going to be a land. We need to draw an Urborg or another Coffers. Opponent exiles Urza's Saga, counters up a Cornucopia, and passes. So they have a card in hand, and we have no idea what it is. We draw another Coffers. Uptick Obnixilis. We get an Urborg. Okay. So let me think about this. This is 3 mana to add 4. If I play Coffers, it is an additional 3 mana to add 4. So this is an extra land. If I play Urborg, let me see. So we have 6 mana. If I play Coffers, we can turn 2 of this into 4, 6, 8 mana, so I can play Archon of Cruelty. If I instead play Urborg, that gives me 6 swamps. Then I can tap Coffers and 2... to add 6, that gives me 9. The difference between 8 and 9 is not 0, but I think my opponent drew... It's possible my opponent drew Emrakul. I think the best play is to play Urborg. activate Coffers, and play Archon. Force my opponent to discard. They will also sack Core Tapper, either to its own ability or to Archon's. Okay, they charge up Cornucopia. We force discard. Okay, it was a blast zone. Pass the turn. And as long as my opponent does not play Emrakul this turn, we should be able to Torment of Hailfire them out of the game. Okay, so we untap, we draw Urborg, uptick Ob, go to 10, go to combat, attack with Archon of Cruelty, force them to lose life, force them to sack Core Tapper, we draw Sign in Blood, go up to 13, they go down to 10. So play Cabal Coffers, activate Cabal Coffers, activate Cabal Coffers, Torment of Hailfire X13, and that should do it. That did it! Oh man, they had me worried there. Yeah, but that shows you the power of Necromentia. If your opponent really only has one way to win the game, or it's like a wish for however they're going to win the game, if you have a Memoricide effect, it's one of the best things you can have versus a combo deck. So, alright, well we run round 1. I'll see you guys in round 2. Alright, round 2, and we will be on the play. If we draw a third swamp, this hand's going to be pretty good. We don't have any card draw, which is a little unfortunate, but I do not want to mulligan for it. I don't think this deck mulligans super terribly well, so... Alright, so we will lead on a Thoughtseize, and it would appear to be Burn. So we can either take Swift Spear or Eidolon from them, and I think we take Eidolon because it represents more damage. Pass the turn. Okay, opponent fetches and shocks, plays Goblin Guide. Alright, Goblin Guide is better for us than Swift Spear, that's for sure. So we will get a second look. Inquisition. We can either take Boros Charm or we can take Swift Spear, and I think we take Boros Charm. They're holding Swift Spear, Rift Bolt, and 2 lands. I should have dismissed before I Thoughtseized, but I did not. I'm going to play Scalding Tarn, crack Scalding Tarn for a mountain, plays Swift Spear, goes to combat, attacks, we're drawing Profane Tutor, kill Goblin Guide, take 1, go to 15, opponent suspends Rift Bolt, so we're taking at least 5 next turn, play Cabal Coffers, suspend Profane Tutor, pass the turn. So Rift Bolt coming off suspend, going to deal 3 to us, giving them a prowess trigger. Opponent has 2 cards left, one of which we know is a land. Well, 3 cards now they drew. So they drew a Swift Spear, they play out a Scalding Tarn, they hit us down to 9. We untap, Profane Tutor ticking down. We draw Baleful Mastery. Opponent cracks Scalding Tarn, gets a Sacred Foundry tapped, play another Cabal Coffers, pass the turn. So I would only Baleful Mastery if my opponent actually casts a burn spell this turn, because I think what we're going to do is go grab Urborg. Opponent hits us for 2, we go to 7. Opponent plays a Stomping Ground tapped. Okay, Profane Tutor coming off suspend. Cast it. I could get Erebos' Intervention, but we need mana, so Urborg it is. Then we draw Verdant Catacombs. Play Urborg. Pass the turn. Now we can full price everything. Baleful Mastery is nice because it's something that can kill Eidolon without triggering it, even if we pay, or even if we use the cheap cost. Opponent draws a card, they go to combat. They attack us for 2. So they may cast a spell here. It's a Boros Charm. Float a bunch of mana. Float a bunch more mana. Soul Shatter. Then Baleful Mastery. Problem is, our only real way to gain life now is Erebos' Intervention, and that only works if my opponent draws a creature. So they hit us down to 3 with that Boros Charm, and I think they're holding a land. Yep, okay. We untap. Draw a swamp, play a swamp. We're dead to anything, basically. Opponent passes. We untap and draw. Another Urborg, not what you want. Pass the turn. Opponent cracks Arid Mesa for a mountain. They play Eidolon. Okay, come on. Erebos' Intervention. Play a third Coffers. Well, if we can draw that Erebos' Intervention before our opponent draws anything else, we'll win. Opponent takes us to 1. Untap. We draw Professor Onyx, who we can downtick to kill so we can stay alive. Play Professor. This makes any... Okay, opponent was just slow rolling a Boros Charm. Kind of unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Okay, so we definitely bringing in Vampiric Link, Damnation, Kalitas, probably Curse of Death's Hold. What's coming out? Thoughtseize is still somewhat relevant. Sign in Blood hurts a lot more in this matchup. Worst Fears might be a little bit too slow, so I'm going to cut Sign in Blood, Worst Fears, and like a Thoughtseize. Actually, I could play Nile Spell Bombs instead of the Sign in Bloods. It just makes it a little bit worse. Necromentia is not as good because their whole deck is just redundant threats. Feed the Swarm might be worse than Thoughtseize. I don't know how to evaluate that, actually. They're both going to lose us about 2 life. So I guess I'll bring in an extra Feed the Swarm over a Thoughtseize. And, try it like this. Alright, I would like to play first. Yep, I'm going to have to keep this. So lead on Swamp, Inquire, Rest in Peace. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Why are they playing Rest in Peace? What do they think we are? My brain is broken. I don't know why they would be playing Rest in Peace. Well, this hand doesn't have any lands, so that's a mulligan. This hand has 1 land, so that is also a mulligan. My opponent mulligan to 6 and keeps it. Oh my gosh, this hand is almost great. We're going to 4. Wow, okay, you know what? Keep. So we have to put back Kalitas, Profane Tutor, and Baleful Mastery? That was some bad mulligans. It's just bad beats. I don't know what I can do about that. Hopefully my opponent kept the triple Rest in Peace hand or something. Opponent plays Grim... Why are you playing those cards in that combination? I'm so upset about this. Inquisition. Opponent has Lava Spike, Goblin Guide. Well, we're going to let them have Goblin Guide and take Lava Spike from them. Pass the turn. Goblin Guide hopefully draws us a bunch of extra lands, and it'll be worth the damage. They play Scalding Tarn. They crack Scalding Tarn. They get a Mountain. They Lava Spike us. Are they refusing to play Goblin Guide? Okay. They play Goblin Guide. Draw me land, Goblin Guide. We only play 24 in this deck. Urborg, thank you. If we draw Erebos' Intervention, play an Urborg. I'm going to use this to kill Lavamancer right now. Pass the turn. Okay, we might actually get up to a high enough mana total. Okay, draw me 2 lands right in a row. Let's go. Land? Aw, it's the other card. Professor Onyx. Okay, that's a good threat to have here. And their last card is a land. Okay, so things are looking up for us. We draw Professor Onyx, play a Swamp, pass the turn. We will be casting Fatal Push. Yes, we're definitely casting Fatal Push. Opponent goes to combat. Attacks us for 5. Top deck is Thoughtseize. Oh, that's going to be atrocious. Kill Goblin Guide. So we take 3, go to 8, untap, draw Thoughtseize, play Cabal Coffers, and this gives us 5 mana. So we need 1 more mana for Professor Onyx to be good. So we'll probably have to fire off a big Erebos' Intervention here, and I'm going to get greedy and wait for the Goblin Guide trigger. It only is bad if they draw Skullcrack exactly, which they very well could. Alright, opponent plays a Goblin Guide, goes to combat, attacks for 5. We draw Bloodstained Mire, and then underneath that is a Damnation. So we're actually going to end up gaining just a little bit of life here. Take 3. I could have gotten really greedy and just like fired off Damnation. But so next turn, if they top deck a land, we can uptick Professor Onyx and hopefully draw something to drain them with. Opponent hard casts a Skewer the Critics. We untap. We draw Sign in Blood. So play Professor Onyx. Uptick to 6. We can either take a land and cast Sign in Blood and stay at 5, or we can take Fatal Push. Fatal Push, I think, is slightly safer. So pass the turn. Opponent draws a card. Now, if it's a creature threat that Fatal Push kills, fantastic. Opponent does not play anything. If it's a Boros Charm, we could be in trouble. We draw another Cabal Coffers. So what would they have held in hand? So if I Thoughtseize, I drain them for 2, I would go to 7. If they have Boros Charm, they get Boros Charm, take us to 3. I think we do cast Thoughtseize here. So drain our opponent. It turns our Thoughtseize and Sign in Blood into mana-neutral effects. Eidolon. Okay, that's actually good. Play Coffers. Activate Coffers. Sign in Blood ourself. Drain our opponent. We get a Damnation, which I may actually just cast. I'm going to uptick. This is instant or sorcery spells only, right? Okay, we're going to take Mastermind's Acquisition. Add a bunch of mana. So I think we want a card from our deck here. Drain our opponent. We go to 6. Then I can either get Kalitas or like Tribute to Hunger. Still have 5 mana. Opponent gives up. We got there. Yes! I'll see you guys in round 3. Woo! Alright, welcome back to round 3. And I think this is a mulligan. I mean, we have 3 1-mana spells, but we have no follow-up with this, so... Opponent is debating about mulliganing. Yep, they keep 7. We have to mulligan, though. Much better. Not amazingly so, but quite a bit. So we're going to put back, I think, Increasing Ambition. Opponent plays Inkmoth Nexus, so this is either Hammer Time or it is... I was going to say Hardened Scales, but play a Swamp. I could Fatal Push now, but I think there might be a better opportunity this turn. Opponent plays an Urza's Saga, so we will be bringing in the... what do you call it? We will be bringing in the Feed the Swarms. So we'll take 1 here. Opponent plays a Walking Ballista X1. So Fatal Push Ballista. They're going to regen Ballista. Untap. We draw a Swamp. Play a Swamp. Profane Tutor. Pass the turn. May not ever get to be relevant, but hopefully this Damnation will be. Hopefully my opponent does not have like an absolutely crazy opener here. If they're missing their 3rd land, they won't be able to make a construct, and even if they do waste all their mana making constructs, we do have a Wrath to follow up. It looks like that's what they'll be doing. Okay, so take 2, Profane Tutor ticking down. We draw Baleful Mastery. Play... I think it's Castle Lochthwain. Play Castle Lochthwain, pass the turn. So the only thing I think I would Baleful Mastery is either a creature tall enough to kill me, or an Inkmoth Nexus, maybe. Okay, opponent makes another construct. Then they get to search out a 1-drop off of Urza's, which is probably going to be an Ozolith. I could see that being good. Yep, it's an Ozolith. Another Urza's Saga. Yeah, that feels fair. Okay. Well, we have to cast Damnation next turn, or we're just toast. Profane Tutor is probably going to go get Urborg, just to guarantee that we have a land that taps for mana next turn. Okay, they play the Glimmer Wasp, so they go to combat. I don't really particularly feel like drawing them a card, so I'm not going to cast Baleful Mastery. They're going to hit us for 8. We're going to go to 9. We untap, Profane Tutor coming off of Suspend. So we cast it. We're going to go get Urborg. They're paying costs? What are they paying for? It's not like... Could they be playing a counterspell of some kind? What free counterspell would fit in a deck like that? I don't think there is one. Okay. So let's go get Urborg. Then we draw a Swamp. Play Urborg. Damnation. So they're going to get to put 3 counters on the Ozolith. They ping Arcbound Worker. Oh, this gets more counters onto the Ozolith. Okay, that makes sense. This gets a lot more counters onto the Ozolith, actually. Alright, pass the turn. Now the question is whether they go for like a 2-turn lethal on Inkmoth Nexus, or if they try and just make tokens for Urza's Saga. The tokens will be relatively small, but they do have 3 cards in hand. They play another Arcbound Worker, and they play a Ravager. They move the counters to Worker. So we can play Dreadhorde General as a double Edict. So play Cabal Coffers. Play Dreadhorde General. Barter in Blood. I just hope that this doesn't make a Inkmoth Nexus big enough to kill us. It's possible that that's what happens here. Oh, that is absolutely what happens here. And we were 1 mana short of casting this Baleful Mastery, too. Wow. That's really frustrating. Maybe I just had to wait and try and see if they would go tall or not. It's also possible they don't take the line for some reason, like they're afraid of Fatal Push, in which case I should not be auto-yielded, so they know that I might have a response. I have 3 cards in hand. Okay, they are going the Construct route. That is important. They're probably getting a Pithing Needle to shut down my Planeswalker. They get an Animation Module, then they play a Forest. They go to combat. Why is this leaves the battlefield? Why is this not when it dies? Okay, so Animation Module. They pay for Animation Module, get a Servo. Then they pass. We untap. We draw Verdant Catacombs, play a swamp, make a zombie, pass the turn. So my opponent did not go for the route that kills us instantly. They went for the safer route, which is fine. Okay, Ancient Stirrings for our opponent. They get Ravager. Okay. They play second Inkmoth Nexus, sure. Here comes one Ravaging Boy. You got it. Yep. They pay and make a servo. Problem is we only have one Wrath in the main deck. They go to combat. They attack. Okay, so block here, because this will draw us a card. If we're going to lock Thwain, do we want to do so before? I would lose 4 life. Oh, that could matter a lot. I think we're still going to do it. Lock Thwain. Another Baleful Mastery. Okay, that actually makes quite a big difference. So we lose our guy, we draw a card. Increasing Ambition. But we do not have another Wrath in the deck. Untap, we draw. Erebos' Intervention. Okay, well that Arcbound Ravager acting as a sack outlet is kind of a big deal. How much mana do we have? We have up to 11 mana. So, make another blocker, play a swamp, add a bunch of mana, full price Baleful Mastery. So they sack Ravager just to put a counter on Servo. I think the best I can do is just Fog. Okay. Oh. Yeah, we gotta do this. They put a ton of counters on the Ozolith, but now we have Erebos' Intervention, which I had hoped to use to gain us a ton of life. But I'm kind of anticipating my opponent animates an Inkmoth Nexus, targets it with the Ozolith, and then in response to the target, we kill the Inkmoth Nexus, which does not get rid of the counters off of the Ozolith, but it does basically Fog for a turn. Opponent animates an Inkmoth. They go to combat. They target Erebos' Intervention, kill it in response. They shouldn't have a way to get it bigger than the Erebos' Intervention minus. Okay. Alright, so we get to Fog for a turn. They play Zabaz. Okay. Which triggers Animation Module. They pay for it. They get another 1/1. We untap. Draw Swamp. Uptick Lily. Curse of Death's Hold would be pretty sweet if we could get it. So I could, Increasing Ambition, get Cabal Coffers. Play Cabal Coffers. Then I would have... what could we do here? I can Increasing Ambition. Hang on. I can play a Swamp, and if I do that, that gives me 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 mana. 12, 13 if I play the Swamp first. So I can Increasing Ambition for 5, taking it to 8. Mastermind's Acquisition. Night of Soul's Betrayal would matter over Curse of Death's Hold here. Oh, that is a big problem. Okay. So if I Increasing Ambition, I go to 2, I get Cabal Coffers, I play Cabal Coffers, then I have 10 mana, but I can get 2 cards, and I can get like Fatal Push, Fatal Push? I'm trying to remember what's in my deck list. Hang on. This hits highest mana cost, not highest power. So yeah, I would have to get like Fatal Push, I think, to stay alive that way. And then we're top decking again. Although it would let me move the counters. It would let me allow my opponent to move the counters if I did that. So, Increasing Ambition. Get Cabal Coffers. Play Cabal Coffers. Activate. Oh, I have 12 mana. I could get Baleful Mastery... I could get Baleful Mastery, or I could get Fatal Push, Erebos' Intervention, or I could get Fatal Push and Mastermind's Acquisition. Mastermind's Acquisition would be able to get me Curse of Death's Hold, and we would probably be okay after that. Okay. I could have also gotten Worst Fears, actually. That may have been better. Let's get Mastermind's Acquisition and Fatal Push. Pass the turn. We can block anything on the ground, and whatever they target with the Ozolith, we can push. Okay, they play a land. They animate Inkmoth. They go to combat. Ozolith. They target Inkmoth. So we kill it. Oh, I needed to let them move the counters, though I don't think that actually matters. Because they would just go right back on the Ozolith. They're going to make one servo bigger. Okay. Opponent swings out. So block the 2 creatures that matter the most. Actually, if I double block here, I only lose 1. Liliana survives. Yeah, okay. That makes Curse of Death's Hold even better. And we draw a card out of the deal. The only thing we have to worry about is Walking Ballista. If I get Curse of Death's Hold, that's it. We untap. We draw Sign and Bud. So, play a swamp, uptick Lily. How much mana do I have? Is it better to just go get Torment of Hailfire, which is currently in my sideboard, or Emrakul? It's better to get Emrakul. Oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why. Is Emrakul a guaranteed victory? We hit them for 2, they go to 17. Yeah, okay, Emrakul's guaranteed. Put a card we own from outside the game into our hand. Get Emrakul. Play Emrakul. Surprise! Flying Spaghetti Monster! Sign in blood ourselves. Go to combat. Hit them for 2. They go to 17, or they go to 18. We untap. We draw Inquisition. Go to combat. Attack for 19. Woo! Okay. So we definitely want Feed the Swarm. Kalitas shuts off Modular because it stops the creatures from dying. It does not stop. It does not stop the Ozolith. Curse of Death's Hold's coming in, as is Damnation. Necromentia is kind of questionable. So what is bad in this matchup? Worst Fears actually kind of strikes me as a little bad. So does Liliana of the Dark Realms. A lot of these cards are going to be just too slow compared to the other options we brought in. I think I'm going to cut Soul Shatter. I don't think they play any Planeswalkers. Hand Hate's kind of bad versus a deck that dumps their hand so fast, especially when we're going to be on the draw. And then I think cutting maybe one Erebos' Intervention here makes sense. Not 100% on that, but we'll find out. Man, something you got to do when you're playing this deck. If you start tutoring, you really ought to think to yourself, is there a card I can get that just wins? Not, is it cool? Not, is it good? Does the card I can tutor for win the game? Because if you have 1,000,000 mana and you're casting Mastermind's Acquisition, do not be tempted into casting a Curse of Death's Hold versus the X1 deck. Cast Emrakul every time. This I will keep. If my opponent leads on like an Arcbound Worker or something like that, Inquisition is probably what we're going to play. Actually, we're probably playing Inquisition regardless. Okay. The opponent starts Llanowar Reborn. We will lead on Urborg and begin with an Inquisition of Kozilek. It is unlikely we'll need this Bloodstainmire like Revolt trigger. It is also possible my opponent is playing black mana for Thoughtseizes and Hand Hate. I have seen that out of the Hardened Scales deck. So potentially fetching off of Bloodstainmire as our first land could matter, depending on what our opponent does. Or has, like if they have a Llanowar Wastes or something like that. Okay, Power Depot. They have only tap lands. They have Pithing Needle and the Ozolith. So let's take the Ozolith, because that makes them a lot easier for us to deal with as a deck. My opponent's going to play a tap land this turn unless they draw an untap land, and that means they're probably going to play Pithing Needle. They'll probably name Liliana Dreadhorde General, which we would be fine with, even though we're holding her because she's not going to come down for a long period of time. This means that our turn to play is likely going to be Suspend Profane Tutor. We will be looking for Cabal Coffers. We're hoping to draw lands. Opponent does not play Pithing Needle. They're waiting to try and intelligently use that Pithing Needle. So Suspend Profane Tutor, pass the turn. We will be very quickly landing this Curse of Death's Hold. So opponent untaps. They play an Urza's Saga. Okay. Then they play Walking Ballista on 1. Moving the counter, making it a Walking Ballista on 2. We untap, Profane Tutor ticking down. We draw Feed the Swarm. I could not have picked a better top deck. Fatal Push the Ballista. They're going to ping us for 2. That's fine. We Sinkhole them. Oh, it's so good. Pass the turn. Yeah, you play your X1 now. Play it. Oh, I haven't done this since Standard. Oh, it's going to be so good. Oh, I can't tell you how good this feels. Do it. Yes! Profane Tutor. Gonna go get Cabal Coffers. Oh, I love Curse of Death's Hold. It is one of the meanest things you can do to an opponent, because if you're casting it against an opponent, it is beyond good against their deck. We get Cabal Coffers and we draw Bloodstainmire. Play Cabal Coffers. Activate. Curse of Death's Hold, enchant our opponent. Oh, what are you gonna do? How do you beat that? How do you beat that opponent? And we're gonna follow this up with Planeswalkers. Oh, it's so good! Oh! It's so good! And yes, it could have been Knight of Souls Betrayal. That would have been completely reasonable. However, if it had been, we would have played differently, and we would have played worse. If they even animate that Inkmoth Nexus, it's just dead. Oh, so good. Alright, we untap. We draw Kalitas. Play Bloodstained Mire. How much mana do we have? Probably a lot, if I had to guess. 9 mana? So I can play Obnixilis and Kalitas. Play Ob. Uptick and draw. Sign in Blood. Play Kalitas. Pass the turn. They can't even get morbid triggers without giving us zombies. Oh, it's so good. It just feels like I'm... Oh my god, it feels so unfair. It's like... You can still play the game, but all of your cards don't do anything. Opponent Pithing Needles, Obnixilis. They're just delaying the inevitable. What are you gonna do, play a Ravager? Oh, this is so mean. It's just like, I have lost so many brutal games to my opponent's deck on the entirety of time that I've played the game of Magic and that I have had a YouTube channel. I have lost so many games to hardened scales because the deck is insanely powerful, insanely fast, and it does very, very broken things. And I am beating it so savagely right now that I can't help but be drunk with power. It is so good. Oh, go to combat. Attack for 3. Now, my opponent can play a Hangerback Walker with X greater than 1. That is something they can do. We counter that by exiling it. Play Liliana. Make some zombies. Sign in Blood ourselves. Oh, play a Swamp. Perfect. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They could use all of their mana to play a Hangerback on 1. Yes! Oh, I'm sorry, opponent. Human beings shouldn't do that to other human beings, but we're 3-0, and I will see you guys in round 4. Alright, round 4, we're on the play, and we have a good hand, especially versus a Lurrus deck I will be keeping. Alright, so let's go ahead and lead on a Thoughtseize. This is significantly worse. So we don't care too much about the life total. We will probably have to Baleful Mastery a Crab. And we can do that before my opponent draws. So let's Thoughtseize a Ruin Crab. I was hoping when I saw Lurrus that this was actually going to be the like Rakdos mid-range deck, or Rakdos aggro, or like Lurrus, Kroxa, Ragavan, whatever it's called, because we have a significantly better matchup versus that. We will have a much tougher time trying to beat our opponent. Opponent is going to Surgical our Thoughtseize. They're going to get a good look at what our deck is, as well as mill us 4 cards. 3 cards, well, really. They will not expect Emrakul out of the sideboard, especially after they're taking a screenshot of our deck list, so... Okay. So they exile 3 Thoughtseizes. They're probably not going to exile the one out of our grave just to keep graveyard count high to hopefully get this Visions of Beyond off. I will be cracking Bloodstained Mire for a Swamp because the odds that my opponent drew exactly Archive Trap is pretty low. Opponent leads on a Flooded Strand. So they're not going to play the Crab this turn because that gives us an opening to just Baleful Mastery. Okay, we draw another Baleful Mastery. Play Bloodstained Mire, crack it immediately. Get a Swamp. Pass the turn. Opponent cracks Flooded Strand. Gets a Watery Grave tapped. They untap. They play a Ruin Crab. They play a Flooded Strand. They mill us for 3. They crack Flooded Strand, so we'll let them draw a card. It is a little bit unfortunate. I have another Crab. Alright, we untap. We draw Inquisition. So, play Castle Lochthwain. Let's do this in the right order, shall we? Baleful Mastery. Then Dismiss, because we're going to Inquisition. Visions of Beyond and Crypt Incursion. Take Visions. Okay, so the good news is our opponent is basically out of action, and we'll have to put Lurrus into their hand this turn. Apologies for anybody who can hear the stuff going on in the background. I really hope that's not coming through the mic, because I know that that's really annoying when it does. Okay, opponent plays an Island. Probably puts Lurrus into their hand. They have nothing... There's nothing worth casting Crypt Incursion over. because we play almost no creatures. If we can get game 1 versus mill, that's huge. So my opponent has these 3 cards, Lurrus, 1 unknown. We untap. We draw Urborg, which makes our hand significantly better. Play Urborg, pass the turn. So my opponent can play Lurrus and reanimate a crab. If they do, we can play Liliana Dreadhorde General and Barter in Blood to get rid of both. So they have to play the land first if they want to play Lurrus. Pretty sure they play the swamp first and save the Polluted Delta for fetching with a crab out. We will be activating Castle Lochthwain on our opponent's end step. That's why I played Urborg and not Cabal Coffers. Also to hide Cabal Coffers from a potential Field of Ruin. Come on. Swamp, Lurrus, reanimate crab. Let's go. That's the one play I can actually counter, so I really hope that's what they do. There's the swamp. Not Lurrus. Fractured Sanity. They're going to mill us for 14. Okay. They're going to mill us for 14. So this way, I think next turn they can Lurrus, crab, then play Polluted Delta. So kind of hoping to draw instant speed removal. A lot of it just went to the grave, though. They are thinking. I would not mind drawing a hand hate spell here. I think that would actually be really, really good against what our opponent's got going on right now. We do have 2 draws to try and find some. Single black. This could be an extirpate. It's a surgical on Sign in Blood. Alright, well, that is a card we play 4 of. So they're going to mill us down to 22 cards. Our opponent is holding Lurrus, Crypt Incursion, Polluted Delta. If we can draw Thoughtseize or Inquisition, or we don't have any Thoughtseize, if we can draw Inquisition, which we have 2 left in the deck, if we can draw Inquisition and take Lurrus, as well as alongside playing Liliana Dreadhorde General, there's a strong chance we can actually win the game, based on, it is entirely dependent on what our opponent top decks. But it is possible. So activate Castle Lochthwain, draw Feed the Swarm. Untap, we draw Tribute. So play Coffers, play Liliana, because we have to get the clock started now. Make a zombie, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. So they'll play Lurrus, they'll reanimate Ruin Crab, and then they'll play Polluted Delta and fetch. They'll mill us for 6, and we'll go down to not that many cards left. So there's Lurrus, there's the crab. Fetch land, mills us for 3. They mill Erebos' Intervention, Swamp, Profane Tutor, crack Polluted Delta for an island, and then they mill Bloodstained Mire, Swamp, Liliana of the Dark Realms. We untap, draw Fatal Push. I think the additional removal spell means we just start firing off removal spells. So Feed the Swarm, kill Lurrus, Tribute to Hunger, eat the crab, make a zombie, go to combat, hit our opponent for 2. We might be able to ult Liliana. I've not seen Worst Fears yet. That is something we could top deck. Opponent could Crypt Incursion themselves to gain life if they have nothing else. It would gain them 6 life. They play Mesmeric Orb. So Mesmeric Orb's actually going to mill us quite a bit. So we mill 4. There goes Worst Fears, Professor Onyx, and Urborg. Draw a Swamp. Play a Swamp. Make a zombie. Go up to 9. Go to combat. Attack for 4. Hit them to 9. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps, they mill Fatal Push and Maddening Cacophony. Another mill spell, though, and I think they win. They play a land. That's encouraging. Then they pass. We untap, mill 2, go down to 10. Oh, my opponent has Archive Trap. We have no way to stop that. That's really unfortunate. We were dead to any mill spell, so that kind of sucks. Well, we were 2 turns from victory, and our opponent just happened to have it. I am bringing in Emrakul, because it's one of the only ways that we have to kind of fight back against the mill deck. We should probably minimize maybe Tutor effects. Not 100% on that. Feed the Swarm doesn't really do anything. I mean, it is hard removal versus our opponent's deck, which is probably better than Tribute to Hunger or Soul Shatter. Kalitas is just another threat we can use to speed up the clock. Torment of Hailfire can end the game. Hand Hate remains one of our better plans against our opponent. So let's cut Liliana of the Dark Realms to Sign in Blood. I could bring in more Grave Hate in the form of Nihil Spellbomb. That would help offset what we're doing with Sign in Blood. I could also manipulate Grave Count versus the Ancestral Recall effect that they're playing, but I don't think we do that. I think we just run it back. This is, I think, our best setup versus our opponent. And if we have a good opener full of a lot of hand hate, or our opponent mulligans a lot or something like that, we could win that way as well. I think we do have to get a little lucky, and by a little lucky, I mean Emrakul not in our opening hand. I said Emrakul not in our opening hand. At least I can put it back on the very bottom of our deck. So now we know that when our entire deck is milled, it will shuffle back in. So let's Thoughtseize our opponent. Archive Trap's not matter until my opponent can Field of Ruin. Let's take... Yeah, I guess we take Archive Trap. It's still the best mill spell our opponent has. I will be Inquisitioning to, I think, take Mesmeric Orb from them. That's going to be one of the harder spells for us to deal with. Okay, so opponent draws a crab and leads on it. We draw Feed the Swarm. Play Castle Lock Thwain, Inquisition, take Mesmeric Orb, Fatal Push the crab, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. If they Surgical us, they will see Emrakul. So opponent drew that Dark Slick Shores because they did not have it the turn before when we Thoughtseized. We draw an Erebos' Intervention, pass the turn. Erebos' Intervention we could use on ourself in the event that our opponent Surgicals us to stop the Surgical. In fact, that's probably the best use for it. Opponent shocks Watery Grave. They cycled Fractured Sanity. They put Lurrus into their hand. Then they pass. We untap. Draw Inquisition, which was the next best draw to a land. So Inquisition our opponent. Take Lurrus. They have 4 lands. So they're probably not doing a whole lot for a while. We just need to draw basically anything. Opponent plays Flooded Strand, mills us for 3. Sign in Blood Swamp, Baleful Mastery. Then they pass. We untap. Draw Baleful Mastery. Feed the Swarm. Opponent cracks Flooded Strand to mill us for an additional 3. Profane Tutor, Swamp, Fatal Push. Opponent untaps, draws a card. They play Field of Ruin. We untap. We draw Archon of Cruelty, which is kind of the opposite of a card right now. Opponent untaps. They play out a Flooded Strand. We untap. We draw Fatal Push, which is not a land, but at least is something we might be able to cast soon. Opponent untaps. They play nothing, even though we know they're holding a Polluted Delta. We draw another Baleful Mastery, pass the turn. Opponent draws, plays a Watery Grave tap, so they are flooding and we are getting screwed. Yep. Draw Obnixilis, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. I would really like to start drawing lands now, please. I mean, at least it's a spell we can cast. Inquisition. Opponent drowns in the lock. Okay, pass the turn. Opponent plays a crab, plays a fetch land. They can mill us for a bunch. I think it's still correct to Fatal Push now. I guess I could have waited for them to crack a single fetch, which they were probably going to do. So they mill us for 3. Torment of Hailfire, Erebos' Intervention, Increasing Ambition. They crack Polluted Delta. They mill us for 3. Cabal Coffers, Mastermind's Acquisition, Cabal Coffers, Visions of Beyond, and we do not have mana, and even if we did, we didn't have enough mana to exile cards to stop that from being an Ancestral Recall, because we would have only been able to exile 2 and there still would have been 20 left. Opponent fields us. Sure, we have to search our deck. So now we hope our opponent mills Emrakul at any point, and we start drawing lands. Okay, they do not mill Emrakul. We finally kill the crab. They mill Coffers, Thoughtseize, Feed the Swarm. We untap. We do not draw land. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They play a Hedron Crab. They play a land and mill us again. Coffers, Urborg, Inquisition. I mean, we play 24 lands, so the odds that this happens is pretty low. Let's go ahead and -2/-2 that crab. Okay, opponent drowns in the lock. They untap. They pick up Obero, because they don't currently have a land. Man, what are the odds? I mean, like, mill's probably one of our worst matchups for any version of this deck. The one time we're doing well, we run into mill. Alright. Opponent Surgical's Thoughtseize. Didn't they already? No, they didn't. That was last game. So now they're going to see that we have Emrakul. So at this point in time, we may want to stay at as big of a, or as many cards in hand as we can, because that way if we draw Emrakul, we can discard it. Okay? Opponent draws a card. They pass. We untap. We draw Urborg. I'm going to hold that in hand for Emrakul-related reasons. Opponent Visions of Beyond, so the Ancestral Recall, up to 6 cards in hand. We untap. Draw Feed the Swarm. Play Urborg. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. It is unlikely our opponent did not notice the Emrakul. Okay. They go to combat. They pass. We untap. We draw Swamp. Play Swamp. I could, in theory, play Obnixilis and cycle, but I don't think that's safe with literally only 7 cards in hand. Opponent untaps, draws up to 8 cards. They Visions of Beyond up to 10 cards. Actually, at this point, activating Obnixilis could kill me. So it's probably better that we don't do that. I don't think my opponent can force me to draw. They Surgical Baleful Mastery. So that's going to get cards out of our hand and might force us... Or we won't be able to draw and discard Emrakul. So we're just going to cast the one we have, because we're losing the ones out of hand that we have anyway. Our other cards are, I think, all singletons except Feed the Swarm. But that does kind of put a big issue in our plans here. So they got Thoughtseize, they got Baleful Mastery. I don't know if both Sign in Bloods are in the grave or not. One of them is. I think we're playing two. They play Polluted Delta, then they pass. They discard a card to hand size. It's a Ruin Crab. We draw Verdant Catacombs, pass the turn. Opponent basically has to hope we draw, like our next draw has to be Emrakul. They play Obero, then they pass. We draw Sign in Blood. That is too risky to cast, so pass the turn. Opponent draws up to 8. The Visions of Beyond, only 19 cards left in their deck. There's a chance we Sign in Blood them to death. Well, there goes the plan of Emrakuling. Yep. Well, pretty sure that does it. That's really disappointing. Yep, because they can exile our whole grave. Well, it's a really bad matchup, and I don't think we played incorrectly. I think we just drew incorrectly, I guess. It's really disappointing. This was the first, like, 5-0 potential league we've had in a long time, so I'll see you guys in round 5. Alright, we'll be on the draw for round 5. And this hand looks good. We can lead on Thoughtseize, line up a Profane Tutor, get whatever we don't have, and worst case scenario, Worst Fears them? We may be Profane Tutoring for a threat here. Opponent leads on Ketria Triome. We untap, we draw a Swamp. So Swamp, Thoughtseize. Let's see what we're up against here. It is the Cascade deck. Opponent has Force of Negation and Fire and Ice. Take Shardless Agent. Pass the turn. So this is probably Crashing Rhinos rather than the Glimpse deck, because the Glimpse deck does not play Fire and Ice and Force. Opponent shocks Breeding Pool. They probably ice us on our upkeep, just to draw a card. They do. This does stop us from suspending Profane Tutor, which is kind of a bad deal. Player board, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They play Flooded Strand. Crack Flooded Strand. This means either they are deck thinning preemptively or they drew a Cascade card. They suspend Crashing Footfalls. Okay. Well, we know what's going on now. So Necromentia will be coming in here. Play Castle Lochthwain. Suspend Profane Tutor. Pass the turn. I think, given the option, we will try to Worst Fears the turn that Crashing Footfalls is going to come off suspend. Because we could cast their own Force of Negation. If they are unwilling or unable to Force of Negation our Worst Fears or Profane Tutor. So Profane Tutor ticks down to 1. We draw Thoughtseize. Play Cabal Coffers. That brings us up to 5 mana. So I could cast Increasing Ambition now. Yeah, let's actually do that. If my opponent wants to Force of Negation, they can. But if they do, we get Profane Tutor next turn. So one way or another, we're getting a second Coffers here. Okay, opponent Force Negations, pitching Brazen Borrower. So we no longer have to worry about that. Okay, so then we can Thoughtseize to make sure the coast is clear. It just means that Worst Fears is going to be a lot worse. Opponent plays a Scalding Tarn, then passes. Well, they HUD us for 4, then pass. We go to 14. We untap. Profane Tutor coming off suspend this turn. And I think I'm going to go get Mastermind's Acquisition. Actually, hang on. If I play a land, I can activate Coffers to get 5. I'll only be at 7, so Archon of Cruelty is not as good, because I can't play it this turn. I could get, like, Professor Onyx and Edict their guy. Let's get Archon of Cruelty. Well, hang on, because if I cast Mastermind's Acquisition this turn, what am I doing? I could just get a second Coffers and rely on drawing something, because that definitely gives me enough mana to do whatever I want. Archon is going to be fairly decent, even when Footfalls resolves. So let's go get that. See what we draw. Another Thoughtseize is also good. Play Swamp. Double check my math. Yep. Okay. Thoughtseize, check our opponent's last card. Force. Take it. Pass the turn. So Crashing Footfalls ticks down to 1. Opponent draws a card. They go to combat. They're going to hit us for 4. Take us to 8. Okay. We untap. Draw Swamp. Play a Swamp. Activate Coffers, so we have 9 mana. Hand check. Okay. Play Archon of Cruelty. Force them to discard their last card and sack Bone Crusher. We draw Damnation, which is an excellent backup plan. Pass the turn. Our opponent gets 2 Rhinos and a card. If they do not draw something which can bounce or remove Archon, we can Worst Fears as basically a time warp to get rid of both of their Rhinos. Opponent got something. Bone Crusher. Okay, that's not frightening at all. We untap. We draw Profane Tutor, so our opponent is just dead. Because we mind control them, they won't be swinging back. We'll tap all their mana and then just attack twice. Mono Black Time Warp. Definitely a way to win the game. Go to combat. Attack for 6, Edict to them. They sack a Rhino, we draw a Swamp. They can head down to 4. The game is over. Alright, Necromentia time. I think Feed the Swarm does come in because it is an efficient answer to the Rhinos. I'm going to cut a couple of Baleful Masteries and a Soul Shatter because of it. Necromentia definitely comes in, because we just named Crashing Footfalls, and then what do they do? I think we actually take out Erebos' Intervention, Liliana of the Dark Realms, and maybe a Sign in Blood. Try it like this. Well, we can Profane Tutor for Necromentia. Hopefully Thoughtseize can keep them off of the primary game plan for long enough. Opponent leads on Steam Vents. Tapped. We untap. Draw Inquisition. So Swamp, Thoughtseize. 3 Cascade spells and Cryptic. Shardless Agent, I think, is their better Cascade spell. Pass the turn. Unless I draw an Inquisition or a Thoughtseize for my second draw, my plan is to suspend Profane Tutor here. So they drew Ice. Profane Tutor, I think, is still the way to go. Pass the turn. Opponent might feel silly if they end up icing a land. Opponent did not draw. Okay, so Profane Tutor ticks down to 1. We draw a Swamp. Let's go ahead and Inquire. They got Force of Negation and Blood Moon. Blood Moon we don't care about. Force of Negation we do. So take Force of Negation, and we have to dodge our opponent drawing a land for 1 turn. If they draw land and cast Shardless, or hold up Violent Outburst. Dang it, the frickin' camera. Why is it crashed? Opponent cracks Misty on their main phase. Turn off auto yields. They get a basic forest. They play an island. And they're holding up Violent Outburst. Hang on, I gotta restart OBS. Okay, so we know our opponent's hand. We know they are going to follow up this Violent Outburst with a Blood Moon. So Profane Tutor, let's go get Necromentia, and we draw. So here comes Violent Outburst into tokens. Inevitable Betrayal? That is bad, but we really only have the 1 creature. It absolutely sucks that our opponent plays it, though, because we do not have removal that can kill that Archon. So we're going to discard Increasing Ambition. We draw Thoughtseize. So, pretty sure that's our only well, we brought in Kalitas, so it's not entirely true. Play Bloodstained Mire, crack it, because we're going to need basics. Get a Swamp. So my opponent is holding Cryptic, Shardless, Necromentia. We've got to get the Crashing Footfalls, though. We still have to name it. A second Inevitable Betrayal would be kind of bad because of... Wow, they went all in. Is it a singleton? They have 2 Inevitable Betrayals. Okay. I'm going to Thoughtseize to get rid of Blood Moon and to kind of clear up their revealed card zone here. Actually, do I have to take Cryptic? I think I have to take Cryptic. Because our only out is top decking like Cabal Coffers and then playing Liliana Barter in Blood. So we have a very short list of good cards versus this situation. Opponent attacks with Archon. We take a bunch of damage. We have exactly now to draw Cabal Coffers. I'm also not opposed to just siding out the creature threats, because then my opponent has to play... Actually, if they play Blood Moon, we can't draw Cabal Coffers, because we won't have an answer. We'll have to draw, like, Damnation. If my opponent Shardless Agents, we have to draw Damnation. If they don't, we have to draw Cabal Coffers. Or, I guess, Baleful Mastery. Sign in Blood. Go to 1. That does not do it. Alright, well, we got. Out of all of the things they would side into, I did not expect Inevitable Betrayal. So, I'm just gonna, like, cut creatures. We'll cut the creature, we'll bring back in Sign in Blood. Everything else can stay in the sideboard. I could bring in Torment of Hailfire, but we're going to win with our Planeswalkers, probably. I'm going to drop a Feed the Swarm to bring a Baleful Mastery back in. I know my opponent has Blood Moon, but we have a lot of basic swamps. Border Hush. That's our roommate. We'll play first. Okay, we'll keep. We need to top deck, but hopefully this is enough disruption to stop our opponent in the early game. They did mulligan to 6. So, I think we lead on Inquisition. Violent Outburst, Brazen Borrower. Take Violent Outburst. Pass the turn. Opponent probably going to lead on Scalding Tarn. They could lead on Island if they're trying to draw land. Draw Castle Locthwain. Play a Swamp. Thoughtseize. They drew Fire and Ice. Take Violent Outburst. Pass the turn. Hopefully our opponent stuck with the Inevitable Betrayal plan, though odds are they went back to the Rhinos. They play an Island. They pass. So they're probably going to ice us here. They fetch with Scalding Tarn. Stomping Ground untapped. They ice a Swamp. We draw a Swamp. Player board. Pass the turn. They untap. They did not draw a land. They pass. We untap. We draw Necromentia. So play Cabal Coffers. Necromentia. Playing around, I don't know, a Spell Pierce effect. They drew Force Negation. That's pretty good. Pass the turn. I mean, they had 2 draws. They had 1 extra redraw, but we untap. We draw Profane Tutor. Play Castle Locthwain. Suspend Profane Tutor. Pass the turn. That will hopefully get us to where we need to go. Opponent draws a card, plays a tap land. They pass. We untap. Profane Tutor ticking down to 1. We draw Baleful Mastery, play a Swamp, pass the turn. I may lose 3 life to draw a card here. Kind of depends on whether or not I cast Baleful Mastery on my opponent's turn. Opponent plays an Island, so they can flash in Subtlety. So my opponent's end step, add a bunch of mana, draw a card, Mastermind's Acquisition. Okay, that's a card. Untap, Profane Tutor coming off Suspend. Cast Profane Tutor, see if our opponent has a response. Let us get a Necromentia, and then we draw Erebos' Intervention. Add a ton of mana. Necromentia. We know they're holding Subtlety, so I could name Subtlety, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to name Crashing Footfalls. If my opponent has a Violent Outburst, okay, let's see what they cast. Crashing Footfalls. Yep. So they get some Rhinos. Violent Outburst goes off. Necromentia. Name Crashing Footfalls. Opponent does have 1 in hand, along with Brazen Borrower and a Subtlety. So I have to give them a zombie, I think. And they're holding Brazen Borrower and Subtlety. So we're not out of the woods just yet. I could Mastermind's Acquisition, but if I Mastermind's Acquisition, what am I getting? They can't counter Mastermind's Acquisition, but I don't think I can cast it this turn. I think I actually need to... I have 6 mana. I can Feed the Swarm, full price Baleful Mastery, and then my opponent only has a zombie. Then maybe we can cast a huge Erebos' Intervention and try and stabilize. I miscounted my mana originally. I thought I had to Baleful Mastery for 2, and I do not want my opponent to draw a card. My camera crashed again. Why is it crashing? I am so sorry. I have to restart OBS again. Okay, and we're back. Pass the turn. I am recording. I'm not muted. Fantastic. Okay. So opponent untaps, they draw. They have Subtlety, Brazen Borrower, 1 unknown in hand. They have Subtlety and Brazen Borrower in hand. They shock Breeding Pool. They attack us for 2. We go to 13. Untap. We draw. Thoughtseize. Okay, this is actually good. Thoughtseize. So my opponent is going to flash in a threat in response, presumably. Actually, what I should have done was Mastermind's Acquisition right there. I should have Mastermind's Acquisitioned for Torment. I still may end up doing that. Opponent is debating about how to respond to this Thoughtseize. I'm not sure that it really matters which one we take here. Brazen Borrower is in theory slightly more annoying. Add a bunch of mana. Mastermind's Acquisition for a card outside of the game. We get Torment of Hailfire. And the reason that I made a mistake is because if my opponent top decks a counterspell, we're in trouble. So we can kill their zombie, they can flash in their 3/3, then we cast a huge Torment of Hailfire and kill them. That's the plan. Opponent does not cast Subtlety. They play Misty, and they're dead. There's no way they're not dead here. We draw Sign in Blood, Torment of Hailfire, X7. That is the benefit of having multiple ways to win. Man, if I had known that they sideboarded into Inevitable Betrayal, I would have sided out the rest of my creatures, because I only have the one. And we got there, we 4-1, we got robbed of the 5-0 because of Mill. But, you know, it doesn't feel as bad as that Urza's Oven deck. We get Burning Earth and 20 play points. Treasure chest number 2. We get 5 play points, a Glimmerbairn Treasure, Retriever Phoenix, and a Mirror Battlesphere. Retriever Phoenix with Extended Art. Treasure chest number 3, we get 10 play points and a Demanding Dragon. Treasure chest number 4, we get 5 play points, a March from the Tomb, and a Weird Harvest. And treasure chest number 5, final treasure chest, we get 45 play points and a Twist Allegiance. Alright. Yeah, so like I said, I think I'm going to start splashing colors. I'm probably going to do like a black-green build that's just like Turbo Hailfire. I'm probably going to do a black-white build that's an alternate version of Control. But as far as versions go, I do feel like this is possibly close to the best Mono Black version you can play. You can make arguments about individual card numbers, like maybe Erebos' Intervention is more important to you because you need to stabilize more in the like mid to late game versus burn, or you need to play Profane Tutor because your opponents don't play a lot of counter spells and you just want to have consistency for the combo. You need to play, more Feed the Swarms because everyone at your FNM plays Urza's Saga versus anything else. Like, so you're going to drop Baleful Masteries for Feed the Swarms, and on and on and on. And the thing is, I think I've proven over so many videos in recent history that this deck is good. No matter how janky it is, no matter how many fun ofs we're playing, the deck is good. And I think it is at least tier 2 competitive, possibly better than that, because if your opponent does not understand how to play against you, or what you're going for, or what singleton win conditions you have that might beat them, you have an advantage, a strong advantage. The downside of playing this deck is it's very skill testing. You need to know what to Thoughtseize, what to Inquisition, when to cast your Sign in Bloods, when to cast your card advantage, what hits you can take, what hits you can't take, what cards you need to draw. It's very complicated, and I feel like, really, if somebody else had built this deck, and I started playing it now, I would struggle a lot more because of that fact. I would not know how this deck plays, necessarily. Like, if I was just starting to learn it, I would struggle a lot, and I might dismiss this deck as being bad. But because I built it, and I tested it a lot, and I know all of the ins and outs, this deck is good. So, my advice to you is, if you want to play this deck, you think the way that I play this deck looks cool, you have some ideas for how you want to play this deck, don't give up if you lose the first few matches or the first few tournaments with it that you play, because the deck is strong. And I think I've shown consistently over enough videos that the deck is strong in its current form to make that claim. So, if you guys like this content, you want to see more of it, please leave a like, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel if you're so inclined, and remember you can follow me on Twitch, same username over there as you find me on here. I stream Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The last few times have been earlier than that. If you have any ideas and you've been playing this deck, please leave a comment in the description below, or in the comments below, not the description. You guys can't change the description, at least I hope you can't. Or you can join us on the Discord. We have a channel that we've been discussing competitive decks, which has mainly been used to discuss this deck. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. You're all wonderful human beings. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! Hey, just wanted to give a shout out to my patrons for the month of July. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate your support. And if you want to have your guys' names show up in this list, there's a link to my Patreon in the description down below. Thank you all so much.